How's it going, everybody? This is the Nitty Gritty. My name is Chad. With me, as usual, is Leonard, and this is a show about wrestling. And this week, we are bringing you another edition of not stupid questions, but our fully loaded questions, where we have to field a question that we've had time to prep for, unlike the stupid questions, which are just coming right off the top of our head. So the question is more like a fantasy booking type scenario than anything else. And it came from a Facebook group called the Chair Shot, where they had
Mhm.
image 3 rows of talent, 3 pictures each on each row, and you had to erase one from each row. And you know, which one would you choose? Leonard and I are taking it a little bit further, and we're selecting three, one from each row, which you will see here. And we are going to be talking about what we think the wrestling world would have looked like without those 3 people. So,
Mhm.
Leonard, I am going
Yes.
to give you the chance to speak first here, and I'm going to choose my three.
Okay.
If we're going based on the original picture, the three I'm giving you, I guess you kind of have to answer this in stages. Um,
Mhm.
I'm giving you, so I'm erasing Ric Flair,
Okay.
I'm erasing the Ultimate Warrior, and
Mhm.
I'm erasing the Undertaker.
Okay. That would probably have been my answer to the question. Those would be the three guys I would erase.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And here's why. Everyone else on the grid, except for Ric Flair, are instrumental to the WWF.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, Austin was in WCW for a bit. Brett went to WCW. But everyone on that list was just crucial to World Wrestling Entertainment, except for Ric Flair. He was there for a little bit for a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I think things get damaged too much without him. Now, you may not get Bret Hart's first title reign because Flair dropped the belt to Bret because of some inner ear issues he was having, but that doesn't mean you still don't get to Bret at some point. Maybe Savage drops it to Bret in some way.
Right.
Now, of course, you have a bigger difference when you talk about the NWA. What happens to the NWA, WCW, if you don't have Ric Flair there? You probably do Harley Race versus Dusty Rhodes. And then you probably have Rhodes being a champion going up against guys like Nikita Koloff. A heel Luger, a heel Tully, Arn? Do you still get the Four Horsemen? You may get the Four Horsemen in a different
Could we
format.
have gotten Magnum TA earlier than his accident?
That was my next point. Maybe Magnum gets the belt before. Maybe Magnum turns on Dusty. I'm in my fantasy league that I've talked about, the long term one. I'm actually feuding Dusty and Magnum right now. I had Magnum turn on Dusty Rhodes, and most everyone over there was like, "Yeah, that would have been a great program to see." So that is more of it. What happens to the NWA? And you, of course, don't get those great, Flair matches with Steamboat and Terry Funk in '89. Maybe Steamboat Funk is the series that we're talking about now. It's just a lot of what ifs, but definitely if you look at that grid and you say, well, everyone on there is a WWF guy, but Flair, that kind of makes sense. So you jump down to the middle row, Ultimate Warrior. Ultimate Warrior again had a great torch passing from Hogan to him at WrestleMania 6, but then he dropped the torch like immediately after. He didn't hold the belt for a year. He was a head case. He was here and gone. He was never great in the ring. So if you don't have Warrior, the question becomes who gets the torch? Is
Right.
it Tom McKee? Probably not. But maybe Hogan loses to a heel because he's going to go off. Maybe it is Kurt Hennig or Rick Rude or Savage again, and then maybe they wind up turning face, and you still get the Slaughter thing. I think you can still get from 6 to 7 of WrestleMania without Warrior. And if you take Warrior out, you don't really lose, I don't think, a whole lot there. I
Right.
mean, he was popular, but for a very short period of time. And you don't have a whole lot of significant Warrior matches. I mean, the match at WrestleMania 7 between him and Savage is great, of course. He has some good matches with Rude. But you don't lose a whole lot without Warrior. And then the last pick, The Undertaker. And I know that's going to upset the great Dan Weber. But again, Undertaker, if you remove him, what does the WWE or F, I interchangeably use those, what do they lose? Taker was usually off in a corner doing his own thing. And
Right.
yeah, he was champion a couple times, but his storylines were always kind of separate. His angles were always kind of separate. Did he have a bunch of great matches with a bunch of great people? Yes. But you don't necessarily lose a lot with losing Undertaker. You lose all the coolness around him,
Right.
but does it kill the new generation era? Does it kill the Attitude Era? It really doesn't. Of everyone on the list, you gave, I think, the three where if you did pluck them out, there's a hiccup in the timeline, but I think the timeline still resolves itself.
Right. No, yeah, I agree with what you were saying. It'll be interesting in terms of Flair. It'll be interesting to see what would have happened with Sting had Flair not been there. Flair
Mm-hmm.
made a lot of guys, Sting being one of the top ones. What would Sting have moved up the card as fast, maybe quicker? Who knows? Um, with the Warrior, the big question becomes, what does WrestleMania 6 look like? Would it have been somebody like Kurt Hennig or, you said Rick Rude?
Mm-hmm.
Bruce Pritchard has talked about how at one point it was flirted with Hogan turning heel like later in his WWE run there. Could they have done something like that? Who knows? Probably not at WrestleMania 6. But
Mm-hmm.
anyway, yeah, and The Undertaker, again, I love The Undertaker, but yeah, if you take him out of there, what really are you losing? You're losing a bunch of good matches, some iconic ones, really. Hell in the Cell, the ones with Shawn Michaels, all that stuff. But in terms of impact, what are you losing? You're losing the streak, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, very, very interesting stuff. So, Leonard, what do you have for me?
All right. Well, in the thread on the chair shot, I said, what would the WWF be, without Hogan, Warrior, and Savage? You're taking the guts out of the rock and wrestling era. But since we already talked about Warrior, I'm going to take the guts out of the Attitude Era. What happens if we get rid of Steve Austin, Shawn Michaels, and The Rock?
Well, the obvious answer there is I think if you get rid of Steve Austin, The Rock, and you said Shawn Michaels,
Yes.
WCW wins.
Yeah.
Like I mean, really, I mean that has to be the main answer there. Specifically, I think that obviously Bret Hart stays maybe with WWF a little bit longer, maybe being more of the face of the company. You still have Hunter Hearst Helmsley there. You would still have Mick Foley come into the picture.
We
Um,
still have Undertaker in this scenario. He doesn't get erased
yep,
here,
yep,
or Kane.
you would still have the Undertaker. So you would still have some important pieces there, but without them being able to get over that hump. I mean, specific like Shawn Michaels. If you lose Shawn Michaels, I'm sorry. Again, are you really losing a ton? Eh, like he was the guy,
He was
but
he was in and out so much during that period. He lost his smile and he hurt his back, and he was
right,
known to be
you
a
know,
diva during that period. So
who do you just you have Bret Hart there, and you would maybe have a longer feud between he and Owen, or something to that effect. If you lose Shawn Michaels, you're maybe losing more in his second run, really, because he helped a lot of storylines and a lot of guys in his second run. So
mm-hmm.
um, but the bigger question is The Rock and Stone Cold. If you don't have that, then there's no way that those famed 83 weeks where WCW was on top end. Because in effect, a lot of the big moments don't happen. You don't have that feud with Vince McMahon. Who do you have? If you might have, what I don't even know if you would have Vince and Brett at that point, because Brett would probably stay there. If he doesn't have Shawn,
Yeah.
then he'd be
You
staying.
know, the Vince Mr. McMahon character did emerge, before that, when they were doing stuff with Jerry Lawler's USWA. Lawler was a
Right.
heel for the WWE, and he was a face back home in Memphis. And Vince actually shot promos getting on Lawler, getting on the Memphis fans. So Mr. McMahon might have still turned out, but then who does he go against?
Right.
You know, I don't know who you build up to fill that position. I would need to probably see the entire roster at that time. There may be a name we're not thinking of that might emerge.
I
But
don't know about a name to feud with him, but I can think of some names that it would be interesting to see how they would fare without these guys around. Like, how would Ken Shamrock have done without those guys there? How would Farouk have done without those guys there? These are all guys that, were really great talents. Would Shane McMahon, I know that might be out of left field, but would Shane McMahon have been a bigger deal during that time or not? Um,
would we have gotten Ahmed Johnson as world champion?
oh God, like that's what that might have been the case. Ahmed Johnson against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 13. That's
Johnson was over for a slim
yeah.
period of time. Maybe Sid stays. Maybe there's a few guys that
Yeah, but you're not taking away softball season, so
no, that's true. And I almost said something about Diesel and Ramon, but they left before Austin and Rock were a thing.
no.
But
But
you probably wouldn't.
you make a good point though, because without
No.
Shawn being there, would that have changed their mindset? I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
for
You
more
don't get the
money,
curtain. You don't get the curtain call.
right?
Yeah. Maybe they do. Maybe they do stay without Shawn. Maybe they're even. I mean, Shawn had great matches with Ramon and Diesel, but maybe they rise higher without him. Because they always lost to Shawn. Not
Right.
always, but I
Mostly.
say they usually lost the feuds.
Right. And,
To Shawn at the end of the
perhaps
day.
somebody like Jeff Jarrett would have risen up the card more in WWE. I mean,
Would have great matches with Brett.
yeah,
That's I think where we go. Who could work with Brett? Now here let me ask you this quick question: Who might would they try to steal someone from WCW, and who would they steal?
yeah. See, that's a good question. I mean, I'm trying to think back to like who left WCW that they got during the Attitude Era.
Bulldog comes to mind.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Bulldog probably would have stayed. There might have been
Mm-hmm.
a bigger feud there with he and Brett.
Now,
Um,
towards the end of the era, was it the Radicals jumped Benoit and Guerrero and Dean Malenko and Perry Saturn?
right,
Do they come over earlier?
right. That's true. Yep.
If Vince gets desperate, does he start trying to grab? Does Jericho come over earlier? Because I don't think Vince would go for the dudes that he had. I think he would be smart enough because he was. I mean, Austin came from the mid card, and Rock came from the mid card, and they all got themselves over. I think he'd be smart enough to see, okay, who's in their mid card that's right there on the edge, and try to bring them over.
Well, Billy Gunn won King of the Ring. We might be WrestleMania 16 to 17. Billy Gunn, world champion.
Yeah, Billy Gunn versus Road Dogg.
That's
There you go. Or it would be Rockabilly versus Road Dogg Jesse James.
yeah. That's
Main event WrestleMania 16. Book it.
Leonard and I called it. That's what would happen.
Mhm.
Yeah. No, so that's interesting. It's interesting to think about that. Cutting the guts out of the Attitude Era, like that. You wouldn't have DX, in any way. You'd have the blue blood Hunter Hearst Helmsley for longer, which
Definitely, yes.
yeah. If you don't have DX, then you don't have the transition from DX to Reign of Terror Triple H, where he's with Stephanie. So
Right, right. Would this Triple H form DX on his own? Well, no, because Shawn was a catalyst to that. So
right,
probably not.
yeah, probably not.
He would morph to something else eventually, but you wouldn't get probably the hunter that you had.
If the butterfly effect, if you look at that, like, would he have still gotten together with Stephanie? Maybe we're affecting people's personal lives, Leonard.
That's true. He would still be with China. Maybe China is still alive.
Maybe China is the world champion
Yes, the ninth wonder of the world.
because Austin wasn't going to job to her nor work with her. So
Hmm.
would you? We have seen at WrestleMania 15 with Tyson there, China and Bret Hart.
And China, with Mike Tyson's help, defeats Bret Hart. It would be news. I mean, they would
Yeah,
have drawn eyeballs. You
but
would not draw eyeballs with something like that.
that's
There
true.
are so many what ifs. I mean, we could talk in days on that, which we're not going to. But any of those, if you take any significant main eventer out of the equation, there are going to be ripples, and there's probably tons of things that we haven't thought about that might be affected or could be affected by removing any of these guys. And we need to cut this short, but maybe we can revisit this another time because I was thinking, if you don't have Hogan, do you
That's a
get
big
the
one. I'm
Rock and
surprised that
Wrestling?
you didn't go with that, but yeah, we can
Yeah,
definitely assemble our own of this. I think and
yeah,
revisit.
maybe that's how we'll revisit it. We'll come up with our own meme, and we'll share that, and we'll do this again with maybe six other different guys or nine other different guys.
Right. All right. Well, let us know what you think. Were our answers, good ones, or were we totally off the mark? Did we forget about something? I'm sure we did, but let us know what you thought in the comments and check out our other videos, segment surgery, what's that card, random match reviews. We are also available wherever you listen to podcasts, and we have full length episodes. And thank you for checking us out. Hit the like button on our YouTube content and subscribe wherever you can. For Leonard, my name is Chad, and we will see you next time.